For the first time ever, the G20 summit is coming to Africa. And instead of using this moment to lift the continent's voice, the ANC is using it to light the very match that may finally burn our last bridges with the West. Ramaphosa's ANC is stumbling into spotlight like a drunkard, caught between the infighting at home and the reckless grandstanding abroad. What should have been South Africa's proudest diplomatic hour is rapidly turning into its most humiliating. South African National Defence Force war games with Russia and China were scheduled to coincide with the G20 summit. Right as the news of these joint military exercises broke, President Donald Trump posted on Truth Social, highlighting the fact that the two military powers conducting these exercises with South Africa, along with their allies, are conspiring against the United States of America. This November, South Africa will host the G20 summit, a first for any African nation. The pressure should have been on our leaders to speak for the continent, to show the world that Africa's time has come. But the reality is very different. The ANC enters this moment weakened, divided, and despised by its own people, clinging to power with barely a quarter of the vote and a broken electoral system. And now, instead of mending ties with our largest trading partners, the ANC has chosen to spit in their faces. While the world's most powerful leaders gather on our soil, the South African National Defence Force will be out at sea staging military exercises, not with neutral allies, not with peacekeepers, but with Russia and China. Two regimes locked in open confrontation with the very West we depend on for our economic survival. Gunnery drills, naval maneuvers, and a political show of force scheduled to overlap deliberately with the summit itself. At the very moment when South Africa should be building bridges, the ANC has chosen to burn these bridges. The two powers that the SANDF has scheduled these exercises with are historically opposed to the United States and the West and still locked in a tense rivalry with the West. To take place right in the middle of the G20 summit is a spit in the face of the entire G20 countries. This is not diplomacy, it's provocation. It will only deepen our already sour relationship with Washington, where sanctions are already biting because of the ANC's failures to deliver on the promises they made under Mandela in 1994 and did the exact opposite that was promised by Nelson Mandela himself. President Donald Trump's decision to snub the summit, coupled with the halting of joint US-South Africa military exercises, leaves no doubt that the relations are unraveling fast. And the irony is very bitter. Just as South Africa's disastrous G20 term ends in December, the presidency of this organization passes directly into America's hands. The very fact that this year's G20 summit is being hosted in South Africa has been marked by months of controversy leading up to the event. In the first place, many have legitimately questioned whether South Africa deserves to be a member of the G20 at all. Even when the G20 was first formed in 1999, South Africa's inclusion was a purely political rather than economic move. At the time, South Africa, the so-called New Rainbow Nation, was celebrated globally as a newly democratized country based on liberal values, rich in resources and sitting at the gateway to Africa. For the West, bringing South Africa into the club was about symbolism. South Africa was meant to represent the entire African continent. But in truth, the economic justification for our inclusion has never ever even been there. At the time of our initial inclusion, our economy represented just under 1% of global GDP, a share that has halved since to even 0.5%. The reality is that under the ANC, our economy has stagnated while other emerging markets have surged ahead. Today, we are not even close to being on top of the top 20 economies in the world. In fact, we are barely scraping the top 40. And interestingly enough, Poland, that had almost the exact same GDP as South Africa in 1994, has just joined the top 20 economies in the world, becoming one of the only 20 countries in the world with a GDP of over $1 trillion US. South Africa, on the other hand, is barely scraping by and have dropped below a tiny island nation like Hong Kong. Our membership in the G20 is not because we belong there, but because of inertia and symbolism. We are kept around as the African seat at the table, while our economy has become a shadow of what it once was. To top all of it off, the President of the United States has repeatedly said throughout the year that he won't attend this year's G20 summit because he rejects South Africa's human rights violations against white farmers in this country. Trump has rightly pointed out that the government policies in this country lead to people dying, but he has also openly condemned South Africa for its foreign alliances with regimes that openly position themselves against American interests and against Western interests. As such, he also recently implemented harsh tariffs on South African exports. By the way, if you find our work informative, you can receive free updates from us on WhatsApp by just following the steps on the bottom of your screen. How can the development of us having these military exercises with Russia and China be interpreted in any other way than a form of a geopolitical signaling aimed at further undermining trust and complicating bilateral engagements with the West? And here's the rub: the US seems to have gotten the message loud and clear. The South African government is actually planning on conducting gunnery drills at sea, which normally includes live or simulated firing exercises targeting sea-based objectives, even while hosting a G20 summit a mere month before the United States is scheduled to take over its presidency. It's hard to fathom why the South African government would do such a thing, apart from seeing this as an opportunity to try to signal their geopolitical independence and their alliances with other powers to the United States and its partners. But doing this is not only strategically reckless, it is geopolitical suicide. The government seemingly thinks that it is playing independent by staging naval games with Russia and China right in the middle of the G20 summit with the West, but in reality, it makes South Africa look like a desperate child trying to prove it is a grown-up, while at the same time driving away the very partners that help keep what little is left of this economy alive. America and Europe buy most of our exports. They keep the trade doors open, and they are the ones sustaining what little remains of our economy. Now Pretoria decides to spit in their faces for the applause of Moscow and Beijing, selling this as sovereignty, but in truth it is nothing more than setting your own house on fire just to show the neighborhood that you can make some flames. The damage that the ANC has done to South Africa this year alone, by refusing to heed warning after warning coming from the United States, is truly incalculable, despite the fact that Ramaphosa's government has been handed ample opportunity by the US government to change course and leave the path of destruction. It has not only stubbornly refused to do so, but in fact, it has opted to shamelessly double down on the geopolitical path to destruction that it seems hell-bent on following. For the ANC, maintaining old communist alliances outweighs engaging in geopolitical realism. At this point, it seems as if they are not acting out of wisdom, pragmatism, or even self-preservation, but out of a blind loyalty to ideologies and relationships of a bygone era. The result is that South Africa stands on the brink of being economically strangled by the very partners who have propped up our economy for decades. Investors are backing up, trade relations are cooling, and the signal to the rest of the world could not be clearer. South Africa is no longer a reliable partner which willingly allies itself with geopolitical forces that the President of the United States have identified as enemies. Instead of being seen as Africa's beacon of hope and opportunity, the very reason we were invited into the G20 in the first place, our government is now positioning us as a rogue state, a geopolitical pawn dancing for the applause of allies who, as we at the Willem Petzer Group pointed out in a recent video, have been completely unwilling to come out and openly support us in the midst of our government's destructive feud with the US. You can watch this video right here. And remember to become a member of the Willem Petzer Group by following the simple steps at the bottom of your screen. Your support is what keeps this channel going and growing and strengthen our hands to change the hearts and minds of people. Goodbye and God bless.